My wife is forcing me to sleep with her best friend and get her pregnant, but I found out the secret they've been hiding instead. My wife Haley and I had been married for 6 years and everything was pretty good. We both had decent jobs, bought a small house in the suburbs, and were talking about maybe having kids in a year or two once we saved more money. Her best friend Jade had been around since before we got married. She was always at our house, came on vacations with us, basically like a third person in our marriage, but I didn't mind because Haley was happy. Jade couldn't keep a boyfriend for more than a few months and was always complaining about how her biological clock was ticking since she just turned 35. She'd make these jokes about stealing my sperm that made me uncomfortable, but Haley always said she was just messing around. Then one night after Jade went home from dinner, Haley sat me down for a serious talk. She said Jade really wanted a baby and asked if I would consider helping her out. I thought she meant like going to a clinic or something, but no. Haley wanted me to actually sleep with Jade until she got pregnant. She said it would be cheaper than IVF and Jade trusted me to be the father. I said absolutely not, that was insane. Haley got upset and said I was being selfish, that Jade was like family, and family helps each other. She actually used those exact words. For weeks after that, Haley kept bringing it up. She'd say things like Jade would be such a good mom and didn't I want to help make that happen. She'd point out guys with kids at the park and say that could be me helping raise Jade's baby. It got to the point where she was mentioning it every single day. Jade started acting different too. She'd wear really revealing clothes when she came over and would touch my arm constantly when we talked. She'd make comments about what beautiful babies we'd make. One time she literally sat on my lap at a party and Haley just smiled at me from across the room. I started avoiding being home when Jade was there. Then Haley told me she'd made an appointment for all 3 of us to meet with a counselor to discuss the arrangement. I refused to go. That's when Haley said if I really loved her, I'd do this one thing to make her happy. She cried and said she promised Jade I'd help, and now I was making her look like a liar. She said maybe we weren't meant to be together if I couldn't support her friend. That night I went to stay at my brother's house to get some space. While I was gone, I remembered Haley had been acting weird with her phone lately, always taking it to the bathroom and turning it face down. I'd backed up her phone to our shared cloud account months ago for safety and still had access. So I checked it. What I found made me sick. Haley and Jade had been planning this for almost a year. They had a whole plan where I'd get Jade pregnant, then Haley would divorce me and claim I cheated. They'd use the baby as proof of the affair. Haley would get the house and alimony, and they'd raise the baby together. There were texts about how they'd been in love since college, but Haley married me for financial stability. They called me their meal ticket and sperm donor. Jade had written that once they had my baby and my money, they could finally be together openly. They'd already consulted with a divorce lawyer about how to make the cheating story stick. The lawyer told them if they could prove adultery with a pregnancy, Haley would get everything. They even discussed recording me with Jade without my knowledge to make it look worse. I screenshot everything and sent it to my divorce lawyer that morning. Then I went back home and acted normal. Told Haley I'd been thinking about it and maybe we should talk more about helping Jade. Both of them got so excited. Haley started planning when it would happen based on Jade's cycle. They wanted to do it the next week when Jade was ovulating. I agreed and said we should have a nice dinner first to make sure everyone was comfortable. That dinner was Friday night. Jade came over in this tiny dress and kept giving me these looks. Haley made my favorite food, and they both kept filling my wine glass. After dinner, Haley suggested we all go to the bedroom to talk more privately. That's when I told them I knew everything. I pulled out my phone and showed them the screenshots. Haley's face went completely white like someone drained all the blood out of her. Her hands started shaking so bad she had to grip the edge of the table. Jade jumped up so fast her chair fell backward and her wine glass tipped over, red wine spreading across the white tablecloth like blood. They both started talking at the same time, their voices getting louder and higher. Haley kept saying the texts were fake, that I must have made them up somehow. Jade was claiming I twisted everything, that I was taking their private conversations out of context. I just sat there with my phone in my hand, completely calm, watching them panic. I let them talk over each other for about 30 seconds before I said I'd already sent everything to my lawyer that morning. The room went quiet except for Haley's breathing, which sounded like she'd been running. Jade moved toward the front door, but I stood up and blocked her path. I told her to sit back down because she was going to listen to exactly what happened next. She tried to push past me, but I didn't move. I explained that my lawyer had copies of every single text message, every email, every detail of their plan. I told them their scheme to fake adultery was documented proof of conspiracy to commit fraud. Haley could either agree to a fair divorce right now, or I would make sure everyone we knew found out what they tried to do. I'd show her parents, her boss, our friends, everyone. Jade's face turned red and she started crying, but they weren't sad tears. She looked furious. Haley just kept staring at me like she didn't recognize who I was. That's when Haley completely broke down. She grabbed my hands and tried to hold them, her fingers cold and shaking. She said she did love me, that it was all Jade's idea from the start. She claimed Jade manipulated her, that she never really wanted to go through with it. Jade's head snapped toward Haley so fast I heard her neck crack. She screamed that Haley was a liar, that Haley was the one who came up with the whole plan. Jade said she only went along with it because Haley convinced her it was the only way they could be together. They started yelling at each other, pointing fingers, each one trying to blame the other. I just watched them turn on each other exactly like I knew they would. It was almost sad how predictable they were. All that planning and scheming, and the second they got caught, their partnership fell apart. I told them both to get out of my house. Haley had until tomorrow morning to pack her essential stuff and leave. Everything else we'd deal with through lawyers. Haley started begging to stay and talk, saying we could work this out if I'd just listen. She reached for me again, but I stepped back. I told her I was done listening to lies. I pulled out my phone and called my brother Troy. Jade tried to leave, but I told her to wait until Troy got here because I didn't trust either of them alone in my house. I thought they might try to delete things off my computer or take important papers. Haley kept crying and saying my name over and over. Jade sat back down at the table and just stared at the spilled wine, not looking at either of us. The 20 minutes until Troy arrived felt like hours. Troy showed up faster than I expected. He must have been speeding the whole way. I opened the door and he took one look at my face, then at Haley crying on the couch and Jade sitting at the table, and he knew something big had happened. I handed him my phone with the screenshots pulled up. His face changed as he read through them. His jaw got tight and his eyes went hard. When he looked up at Haley, I'd never seen him look at anyone like that before. He told her to get whatever she needed for tonight and get out. His voice was scary calm. Haley tried to explain, but Troy cut her off. He said he didn't want to hear it. She grabbed her purse and her coat, still crying, and left without another word. Jade followed her out. Neither of them looked back. Troy locked the door behind them and turned to me. He said we were changing the locks tonight, and I was staying at his place until the divorce was final. He said Haley didn't deserve another second of my time or energy. We went to the hardware store right then, at almost 10 at night. Troy knew which locks to get and how to install them. We got back to the house and he changed both the front and back door locks while I packed a bag. It took him less than an hour. He worked fast and didn't talk much, but I could tell he was angry on my behalf. When we finished, we loaded my stuff into his truck. I took one last look at the house before we left. It didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a place where I'd been played for a fool for 6 years. Troy's apartment was across town, smaller than my house, but clean and quiet. He set me up in his guest room and told me to get some sleep if I could. I didn't think I would, but I was so exhausted from the adrenaline crash that I passed out almost immediately. The next morning, I woke up to banging on Troy's door. It was barely 8 in the morning. Troy answered it, and I heard Haley's voice, then another woman's voice I recognized as her mother, Olive. I got dressed quick and came out of the guest room. Olive was standing in Troy's living room looking around like she owned the place. She started yelling at me the second she saw me. She said I was cruel and heartless for abandoning my wife, that Haley called her sobbing last night saying I threw her out for no reason. She said whatever problems we had, we should work them out like adults instead of me running away. I didn't say anything. I just pulled out my phone and handed it to her. I told her to read the messages between her daughter and Jade. Olive's face changed as she scrolled through the screenshots. Her mouth opened a little and her hand came up to cover it. She read for what felt like forever, her eyes getting wider. When she finally looked up, she wasn't yelling anymore. She turned to Haley, who was standing behind her looking at the floor. Olive asked if this was real. Haley started to say something, but Olive cut her off. She asked if Haley really planned to trick me into getting Jade pregnant so she could divorce me and take everything. Her voice cracked on the last word. Haley tried to explain, but nothing she said made sense. Olive just kept shaking her head. She asked Haley if this was really who she was, if she raised someone who could do something like this. Haley started crying again. Olive handed my phone back to me and told Haley they were leaving. She didn't apologize to me, but I could see in her face that she was ashamed. They left, and Troy locked the door again. Monday morning, I met with Elena Velasquez at her office downtown. She was the divorce lawyer I'd sent the screenshots to on Saturday morning. Her office was on the 10th floor of a glass building with a view of the whole city. She had the screenshots printed out and spread across her desk when I walked in. She told me this was one of the clearest cases of fraud and conspiracy she'd seen in 15 years of practice. Most divorce cases were messy and emotional with lots of he said, she said, but this one had everything documented in their own words. She explained that Haley's plan to fake adultery actually worked against her now. We had proof she was trying to manipulate the legal system, which meant I was in a much stronger position than most husbands going through divorce. Judges didn't like people who tried to game the system. Elena said we could push for me to keep the house and most of the assets since Haley had been planning to commit fraud. She asked if I wanted to go after Jade too for conspiracy, but I said I just wanted to be done with both of them. 3 days later, Elena got a call from Haley's new lawyer. Elena put it on speaker so I could hear. The lawyer tried to claim the texts were just venting between friends, that they didn't mean anything real. People say things when they're upset that they don't really mean. Elena didn't even pause before responding. She pointed out that Haley and Jade had consulted with a divorce attorney about the specific strategy, which proved intent and planning, not just venting. That consultation was documented. There were emails setting up the appointment. The lawyer on the other end got quiet. Then he said he'd talk to his client and call back. Elena smiled at me after she hung up. She said Haley's lawyer just realized how bad this looked and was probably telling Haley right now that fighting this was a terrible idea. I started telling close friends what happened because I knew Haley would make up her own version of events. I called my best friend Cameron first. We'd known each other since college. I met him at a coffee shop near his work and showed him the screenshots. His face went through about 5 different expressions as he read. When he finished, he said he was horrified but not totally surprised. He admitted he always thought Jade was weirdly possessive of Haley. He said their friendship seemed intense in an uncomfortable way, like Jade was always touching Haley or sitting too close or making comments that seemed more than friendly. But he never imagined they were actually together and planning something like this. He asked if I needed anything, and I said I just needed people to know the truth before Haley started lying about what happened. 2 weeks after the Friday night confrontation, I was going through our bank statements with the financial advisor. I wanted to understand exactly what money we had and how to split things fairly. That's when I found something that made me feel sick all over again. Haley had been secretly sending money to Jade for months, not just small amounts either. She'd been paying Jade's rent, which was $1,200 a month. She'd been making Jade's car payment, another $300. There were Venmo transfers for groceries and gas and other stuff. I added it up and it came to almost $2,000 a month for the past 8 months. $16,000 of our money I thought we were saving for our future and maybe kids someday, had been going to support Jade. Haley had been using my income to take care of her girlfriend while lying to my face about our finances and our future. I sent the bank statements to Elena immediately. She called me back within an hour and said this was even better evidence of fraud than the texts. Haley had been stealing marital funds to support her affair partner while planning to leave me. This was exactly the kind of thing judges hated. Elena filed for divorce the following Monday morning. She called me from her office to confirm she'd submitted everything to the court and that Haley's lawyer would receive the papers by end of day. The petition cited fraud and emotional abuse as grounds for divorce, which felt accurate given everything that happened. But what made me sit up in my chair was when Elena explained she'd also included a financial claim. She wanted Haley to pay back every dollar she'd secretly given to Jade over those 8 months. $16,000 of marital funds used without my knowledge or consent. Haley's lawyer called Elena 3 days later trying to negotiate. He claimed the money transfers were just normal friend-helping-friend situations, nothing unusual or wrong about it. Elena shut that down immediately by reading him specific text messages where Haley and Jade discussed using his money to build their future together. The text made it crystal clear this wasn't innocent friendship support. This was funding their planned life after they destroyed mine. The lawyer got quiet after that and said he'd talk to his client about settlement options. I was at Troy's apartment the following Tuesday around 7 in the evening. Troy had gone to pick up dinner from the Thai place we both liked, leaving me alone in his living room watching some cooking show I wasn't really paying attention to. That's when someone knocked on the door. I looked through the peephole and my stomach dropped. Jade stood in the hallway wearing jeans and a sweater, looking smaller and more nervous than I'd ever seen her. I almost didn't answer, but then I remembered my phone was in my pocket. I pulled it out, opened the voice recorder app, and hit record before I opened the door. She started talking immediately, words spilling out fast like she'd practiced this speech. She said she was sorry, that she never meant for things to go this far, that it was all getting out of hand. She claimed if I dropped the financial claims against Haley, she would testify in court that the whole plan was her idea. She'd take full responsibility and say she manipulated Haley into going along with it. I just stood there in the doorway listening to her try to save Haley by throwing herself under the bus. When she finally stopped talking and looked at me with these hopeful eyes, I held up my phone so she could see the recording app running. Her face went completely white. I told her that her showing up here trying to manipulate me again was just more proof of who she really was. That I had evidence of her trying to interfere with legal proceedings now, that she needed to leave and never contact me again. She opened her mouth like she wanted to argue, but nothing came out. She turned and walked down the hallway without another word. I closed the door, stopped the recording, and immediately sent the file to Elena with a text explaining what just happened. Elena responded within 5 minutes saying this was perfect evidence of witness tampering and that Jade was an idiot. My phone rang 2 days later while I was at work. The caller ID showed Olive's number and I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. Olive's voice sounded different from it had at my house when she was yelling at me. Quieter. Older somehow. She said she needed to apologize for how she reacted when I showed her the screenshots. She'd been thinking about it constantly since that day and realized she'd chosen to believe her daughter without really looking at the evidence. She told me Haley had been calling her every day since the confrontation, crying and claiming I was abusive and controlling, that I'd manipulated the text messages somehow and was trying to destroy her reputation. But Olive said she went back and read through all the screenshots I'd sent her again. Really read them this time instead of just skimming, and she couldn't deny what was right there in her daughter's own words. She said she felt like she didn't know Haley anymore. That the woman who wrote those texts about using me as a meal ticket wasn't the daughter she thought she'd raised. She cried a little on the phone and said she was devastated, but she believed me and she was sorry. I didn't really know what to say to that, so I just thanked her for calling. She told me she'd be willing to testify on my behalf if it came to that, which shocked me. After we hung up, I sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes, just processing the fact that Haley's own mother was on my side. A month into living at Troy's place, I had the worst night since everything exploded. It was a Saturday around 2 in the morning and I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the moments from my marriage that I thought were real. Our wedding day when Haley cried during her vows, and I believed she meant every word. The vacation we took to the beach where she held my hand and talked about growing old together. Every single time she said she loved me while secretly planning to destroy my life. I got up and went to the living room where I'd stored some boxes of my stuff from the house. I found the one with our photo albums and started going through them. Pictures of us smiling at restaurants, at friends' weddings, on hiking trips. In every photo we looked happy and in love. But now I knew it was all fake on her side. She was just playing a role while I actually loved her. Troy must have heard me moving around because he came out of his bedroom in sweatpants and a t-shirt. He didn't ask what I was doing or tell me I should try to sleep. He just sat down next to me on the couch and looked at the photos with me. We sat there in silence for probably an hour while I went through album after album. He handed me tissues when I needed them and kept his hand on my shoulder. Around 3:30, I finally closed the last album, and Troy asked if I wanted to watch something stupid on TV. We ended up watching old episodes of some sitcom until the sun came up. He never tried to make me feel better or tell me things would be okay. He just stayed there while I grieved for the life I thought I had. Cameron called me the next week sounding weird and uncertain. He said he'd run into Jade at a coffee shop downtown that morning. She'd been sitting at a table with another woman, and they were holding hands across the table. Not in a friend way, in a couple way. The woman had her arm around Jade's waist when they got up to leave and kissed her cheek in a way that made it obvious they were together. Cameron said he watched them for a minute, surprised, then went outside and called a mutual friend who knew Jade through work. That friend told him Jade had been dating this woman named Ronan for almost 2 years. 2 years. Which meant Jade was already in a whole relationship when she and Haley came up with their plan to get me to sleep with her and have a baby. I felt sick when Cameron told me this. Everything I thought I understood about their scheme suddenly had another layer I hadn't seen. They weren't even actually a couple in the way I'd imagined. Jade had her own girlfriend the entire time. The discovery that Jade had been dating Ronan for 2 years made everything so much worse. I'd been thinking of Haley and Jade as two people in love who wanted to be together but needed my money to make it work. That was bad enough. But knowing Jade had a whole separate girlfriend meant their plan was even more calculated and cold than I'd realized. They weren't even really together. They were just using each other to use me. Haley wanted Jade's baby as proof of my affair, so she could take everything in the divorce. Jade wanted my DNA and probably some of that $16,000 Haley had been giving her, and Ronan was just sitting there in the background the whole time while her girlfriend plotted to get pregnant with my child. The layers of lies made my head hurt. I started wondering if I'd ever known either of them at all. If anything about the last 6 years had been real. Every memory felt contaminated now by knowing how many people were lying to me at once. The mediation happened on a Thursday morning in a conference room downtown. Elena sat on my left, Haley and her lawyer sat across the table, and the mediator sat at the head trying to look neutral and professional. We'd been there for about an hour going over asset division when Haley suddenly started crying. Real tears running down her face, her voice shaking as she looked right at me. She said she knew she'd made mistakes, but she still loved me. That she wanted to work on our marriage if I'd give her a chance. That we could go to counseling and fix this. The mediator looked uncomfortable, but asked if she was serious about reconciliation. Haley nodded and reached across the table like she wanted to hold my hand. The mediator then asked if she was willing to be completely honest about the affair planning and pay back the money she'd given to Jade. Haley pulled her hand back immediately. Her tears stopped like someone had flipped a switch. She said she wouldn't admit to anything because she didn't do anything wrong. Just like that. No more crying, no more talk about loving me or fixing things. Her lawyer put his hand on her arm like he was trying to stop her from talking, but she ignored him, She said the texts were private conversations that I had no right to read, and that giving money to a friend wasn't a crime. The mediator sat back in his chair, and I saw him write something on his notepad. Even he could see exactly who she was now. Elena looked at me, and I gave her a tiny nod. She told the mediator we were done trying to negotiate and would proceed with the divorce as filed. We settled 2 weeks later without going to court. Haley got her personal belongings, her car, and nothing else. No house, no savings, no alimony. She had to agree to pay back half of the $16,000 she'd given to Jade, which came to $8,000 paid out over the next 2 years at $333 per month. Elena told me I could probably fight for more, maybe even get all $16,000 back, but dragging this through court would cost me thousands in legal fees. Plus more months of having Haley in my life through court dates and hearings and depositions. She said sometimes the best revenge was just being done with someone. I agreed to the settlement because I wanted Haley out of my life more than I wanted every dollar back. The lawyer drew up the papers and we both signed. Her lawyer looked relieved. Haley looked angry but trapped. Elena looked satisfied. I just felt tired. The divorce finalized 4 months and 3 days after that Friday night dinner when I showed them the screenshots. Elena called me on a Tuesday morning to say the judge had signed the papers and it was officially done. I went to her office that afternoon to pick up my copies. Troy came with me because he knew I didn't want to be alone for this. Elena handed me the folder with all the final documents and congratulated me on being a free man. I sat in her office looking at the papers that said my marriage was over. 6 years together, gone. Except it had never really been together. It had been Haley using me while I loved someone who didn't exist. I felt relieved that it was finished. Sad that I'd wasted so much time. Angry that she'd done this to me, but mostly I felt free. Like I could finally breathe without wondering what she was planning or who she was texting or what lies she was telling. Troy put his hand on my shoulder and asked if I was okay. I told him I would be. We left Elena's office and went to get lunch because I couldn't think of anything else to do with this strange feeling of being suddenly unmarried. I moved into my own apartment 3 weeks after the divorce finalized. Troy had been amazing letting me stay with him, but I needed space that was completely mine. A place with no memories of Haley or Jade or any of the lies. I found a small one-bedroom place about 20 minutes from work. The rent was reasonable and the building was old but clean. I didn't have much furniture since Haley had kept most of what was in the house as part of her personal belongings. Troy gave me his old couch that he'd been meaning to replace anyway. Cameron brought over a kitchen table and chairs he'd been storing in his garage. Another friend donated a bookshelf and some lamps. My bedroom had a mattress on the floor and a plastic dresser I bought at a discount store. The whole place looked like a college apartment with mismatched furniture and bare walls. But it was honest. Every single item in that apartment was there because someone actually cared about me and wanted to help. Nothing was chosen by Haley to match her fake vision of our fake life together. I sat on Troy's old couch that first night eating pizza straight from the box and looking around at my small, honest, real apartment. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Actually mine. And that felt better than the house with Haley ever had. I found out about a month after moving into my apartment that Cameron had been keeping tabs on what happened to Haley and Jade after everything fell apart. He told me over coffee one Saturday morning that their relationship didn't survive the divorce. They'd turned on each other completely, each one blaming the other for the plan failing and for me finding out. Jade had apparently moved to another state to live with Ronan Austin, the girlfriend she'd been hiding the whole time. Cameron said Jade just packed up and left without even saying goodbye to anyone, which seemed fitting for someone who'd been lying to everyone for years. Haley was living with her mother Olive and working retail at some clothing store in the mall. She couldn't afford her own place because of the debt she owed me and because she'd lost her decent job when word got around about what she'd tried to do. Cameron had seen her once at the grocery store and she'd looked right through him like he wasn't there. He said she looked tired and angry, and he felt bad for about 2 seconds before remembering what she'd tried to do to me. 6 months after I showed them those screenshots, I realized one morning that I was actually doing okay. I'd been seeing the therapist Troy recommended every week, working through all the trust issues and the feeling that everyone around me might be secretly plotting something. The therapist helped me understand that Haley and Jade were specifically terrible people, not proof that everyone in the world was terrible. It sounds obvious when I say it like that, but it took months of talking it through to really believe it. I started being able to meet new people without immediately wondering what they wanted from me or what they were hiding. I could have a normal conversation without analyzing every word for hidden meanings. I went on a few dates and actually enjoyed them instead of spending the whole time waiting for the other shoe to drop. I was honest about my baggage from the start, telling people I was divorced and still working through some trust stuff, and being upfront about it actually made me feel more secure rather than less. Then I got a promotion at work that I hadn't even been thinking about during all the marriage chaos. My boss called me into his office one afternoon and told me they were moving me up to senior analyst with a decent pay raise. He said I'd been more focused and confident in the past few months than I'd been in years, that whatever personal stuff I'd been dealing with seemed to have sharpened me instead of breaking me down. I thanked him and went back to my desk, feeling like maybe losing Haley wasn't the worst thing that could have happened to my career. I'd been so distracted during the marriage, always worried about making her happy and dealing with her constant demands, that I hadn't realized how much mental energy it was taking. Without that weight, I could actually concentrate on my work and do it well. A year after I pulled out my phone and showed them those screenshots, I was sitting in my apartment on a Friday night with Troy and Cameron, eating pizza and watching some terrible action movie, and I realized I was in a genuinely good place. My apartment was small, but it was mine, and I loved it. The furniture was still mismatched stuff from friends, but it felt more real than anything in the house with Haley ever had. I had friends who'd proven they were real when things got hard, a brother who'd had my back completely through the worst time of my life. I was dating casually and enjoying it without the pressure of trying to build something permanent right away. I had a job I was good at, and a future that was completely mine to build however I wanted. Haley and Jade had tried to use me as their meal ticket and sperm donor, tried to trap me in their scheme and take everything I'd worked for. Instead, they'd given me the gift of knowing exactly who they were before I wasted any more years on them. I could have spent another decade with Haley, maybe even had kids with her, before finding out she'd never loved me at all. The betrayal had been brutal, but the timing had been lucky, and sitting there with my brother and my best friend, I felt grateful for that luck.